In this lesson, I'm going to go over the ventricular system. So what we've done here in this image is to remove the left half of the brainstem, and the cerebellum to reveal the deeper ventricles and some other deep nuclear structures. So on this side we see the medial surface of the right cerebral hemisphere. This would be right here the temporal lobe, the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe down here. And this white pale structure here is the corpus callosum, which interconnects the left and right cerebral hemispheres. The blue structures are the ventricles, and we have the lateral ventricle here. This would be the lateral ventricle of the left cerebral hemisphere, which connects to the third ventricle via the interventricular foramen of Monro here. The third ventricle is connected to the fourth ventricle, which is right here, and it connects through a structure called the cerebral aqueduct here. The cerebral aqueduct traverses the midbrain, which is here. Finally, CSF, which is produced in the lateral, third, and fourth ventricles, leaves the ventricular system through several foramina, which are located in the fourth ventricle. And the two lateral foramina here are called the foramina of Lischka, and there's a medial foramen here called the foramen of Magendie. So CSF is produced in the ventricular system, and it exits through these three foramina here to be reabsorbed into the superior sagittal sinus, which we don't see in this cut. So other structures that we see here are the cerebellum, which has been cut here in a mid-sagittal section, and you can see the cerebellar cortex here in lavender or purple, and you see the white matter tracts of the cerebellum. This here is the pons, and this is the medulla. As said before, this is the midbrain. The other structure we see here in green is the caudate nucleus, and it has three sections as well: the head, the body, and the tail. And one thing to notice is that it's closely related to the lateral ventricle. So the head and body of the caudate form the lateral border of the lateral ventricle, whereas the tail of the caudate nucleus forms the superior border of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. The caudate nucleus is important in cognition and in movement, and it's highly interconnected with the rest of the cerebral cortex. And different parts of the caudate subserve different functions. The anterior part of the caudate is more related to cognitive functions, whereas the body of the caudate is related to movement. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's a good summary. So other things to notice are this large gap here in the third ventricle. That gap is where the massa intermedia of the thalamus connects the left and right halves of the thalamus. So the third ventricle is bordered by the thalamus, and you don't see it here because the thalamus has been removed. So the left thalamus would be sitting right here, and then there's a gray matter portion which connects it to the other half of the thalamus on the right side, which you can't see here either because it's deep to all these structures. Also, this part of the third ventricle here that I'm outlining right now is bordered by the hypothalamus, and it dips down here into this little stalk, and this is where it's dipping down into the stalk of the pituitary. So the pituitary has been removed also, but it would be hanging off right here. So you can see that the ventricles are lined by various brain structures, and it's important to know their boundaries. And some of the boundaries that we've gone over are the caudate nucleus, the thalamus, the hypothalamus in this region, and then for the cerebral aqueduct the boundary would be the midbrain, and then the fourth ventricle is bounded by the pons, the medulla, and parts of the cerebellum, or areas close to the cerebellum,